asking you about the recording. Okay, so this might be a silly question, but toilet training, potty training, why bother? Why is it important? So, yes, most of your kiddos are little now, right? If you're joining us, your kids probably in between the ages of 3 and 5, okay? But they won't always be. Toilet training will help to increase the following for our kids: safety, independence, and self-esteem, right? I feel like a couple of them go hand in hand, right? We always want to teach our children, no matter their abilities, to be as independent as possible in all areas of development. And toilet training is no different, right? So we want to help them to be as independent as they can within this area, which will also help to increase their safety as they get older, and in order for them to be more independent in this area and need less support, right? And also self-esteem. Potty training is one of the areas that when children start to be successful, you can see like the pride, right? When they start to sit or go. So it is important, and no matter where you are, no matter where you're at in this process with your child, we're going to talk about this a lot today. There's always some place to start increasing these skills. If you aren't muted, please mute yourself. I will try to mute anyone else as well that is not able to. All right. So readiness. We hear this a lot, okay? We hear talk like, oh, are they ready? What are readiness skills? So I want to talk about this a little bit more. Okay. So here are some questions that you typically hear when someone's talking about toilet training or potty training readiness. Are they staying dry for an hour or more at a time? Can you predict when they might be going? Are they looking for privacy or going to specific spots? Are they making a specific facial expression or gesture so you know when they're going to the bathroom? Are they noticing when they're wet or soiled? Maybe it's pulling down their pants, crying, pulling their diaper off. It could be even other challenging behaviors. We've had students that all of a sudden start pulling down their pants. And I'm like, where is this coming from? And I'm like, oh, they're now recognizing when they are wet, which could be a sign of readiness, right? But here's the kicker, okay? Whether or not your child is showing these signs, okay, you can start with some prerequisite skills. You can start working towards toilet training, whether or not your child is showing some of these skills. Are these some signs of readiness? Sure, it is. But I have to tell you that every child is different, right? Especially children with sensory differences, right? Children with different motor delays, okay? So all of the typical readiness indicators may not necessarily be applicable to you and your child, okay? So hold that thought. We're gonna start talking about what next, right? So we're gonna talk a little bit about motor skills, because motor skills are important, okay? But they should not be the deciding factor on whether or not we're going to work on something, right? So here are some skills that children need to toilet train. They need to be able to sit upright on the toilet, maybe approach the toilet, transfer onto the toilet. They might need to step on a step stool, shift their weight, right, to reach for toilet paper. Maybe they need to stand and balance while pulling pants up and down. They might need to grasp some fine motor skills, their pants and underwear, to pull them up and down. Opening, closing fasteners, buttons, snaps, zippers, or ties. Flushing the toilet, using toilet paper, right? So these are all different skills that children use when toilet training. So there's lots of different equipment out there that can be used to assist children in toilet training, okay? Just like in the classroom, where we might have adapted equipment to meet the needs of your student, the same can be said for the bathroom. Okay, so there are lots of different ways that you can support a child in toilet training. Okay, there are those little standalone potty seats, right? Like the Elmo one. There are the little inserts, like number 1, that you just stick right on the typical toilet. We use a lot of stools, right? Like number 2, okay? Stools are really useful when toilet training, because most of us in our homes don't have little potties. At school, our potties are lower, so most of the kids' feet will touch the floor. If you have a child on a big potty seat, right, maybe you're using the insert, when their feet are dangling, that can be a sense of insecurity for some kids. So having the stool there can really help to ground them. The same idea goes for number 5. Yes, it's a step up onto the toilet, but they can also put their feet there while they're sitting on the toilet. Number 3 is a more adapted seat. For maybe a student that has more significant motor concerns. So those sort of adaptive equipment for the bathroom can most of the time be ordered through a durable medical supply and paid for through your insurance. If that is something that you are interested in, your physical therapist can definitely help you with securing that type of equipment. Number 4 is something a little simple, but I really love it. It's just like an extra handle or like arm bar to help kids that might not have the strength to pull up and down. So this is here on looks like a bathtub, like to the right of the bathtub to help them get in and out. But you could also put this to the right if you have a wall next to your potty. You could also put that there. Again, it could create some more security for a student that might feel a little insecure with balancing themselves on the potty. This is another example of some equipment that it's like a 3-in-1. Now I'm not promoting you to go out and buy anything. Please don't take it out. I just wanted to present to you all of the different options and how having a variety of things available can really help to meet the needs of your child. So this is just got 3-in-1. So as you can see in the middle, it can be used as a step stool. It can be used as a standalone potty seat. And it can be used again as a step stool for hand washing. Clothing management. So talk a little bit about motor skills, talked a little bit about equipment, and now we're talking about clothing management. So having pants or bottoms with elastic waistbands that are easy to pull up and down is a really good starting point. You want to avoid things like onesies, overalls, footy pajamas, pants and shorts with buttons and zippers, things that kids can't do independently. It's just going to create a barrier when you do start toilet training. You might only have a little bit of a heads up once you actually start training, of 5 to 10 seconds. So you want things that are easy up, easy down. And you can help. So we're saying that, like, yes, your student needs to do all of these things in order to potty train. But guess what? You can help, right? You can provide what we call school prompting, and it's just like assistance, right? You're going to help them, right? If they can't pull their pants up and down on their own, then you're going to help them, right? So you might pull their pants like almost all the way up, and then they pull up the last little bit, right? That's what we call like backwards chaining, right? Kiddos feel successful, even though we're providing them assistance. And then little by little, right, you start pulling them up a little bit less, right? So it's okay to help, okay? It's okay. Pulling up in the back, that's one part that's really hard. It takes a lot of skills for a kid to reach behind and pull up. But that's another skill to work on as well. And then using simple language that fits the task. Push them down, pull them up. If you've been to any of our other family group trainings, we've talked about positive language, and we've talked about providing short, simple directions. Same goes for potty training. Okay, we want to keep it short and sweet. Sometimes too many words, especially for our young kids that might have some language delays. They're not going to make the association between what you're saying and the task, right? And that's ultimately what we want to do. We're gonna narrate the things that we're doing, right? Oh, we're pulling your pants down. We're sitting on the potty. We're gonna count to 3. So you're just gonna narrate, right? And over time, they will associate the action with or what you're doing with the words and the narration. We'll talk a little bit later too about pictures. That's another great way to teach the steps in the routine. So, working on skills through play. So, we're still talking about some prerequisite skills. We're talking about all the things that it takes to potty train. And we're going to get to the point where we talk about the actual potty training, but we have to start where the kids are at. We have to meet them where they are, okay? So if they do have a lot of gaps in these skills, there are things you can work on at home very easily through play, okay? I don't think it's fair to give parents a ton to do at home when, I know I have 3 kids right now at home. I work full time. I know there's not a lot of time in the day to do other things, right? And I'm lucky my son this year has a teacher that like doesn't really believe in homework, and I'm like, oh, that's wonderful for our family, right? But there are things you can do through play that will support the skills needed for potty training. Some of this stuff you might already do, but like the picture at the bottom is just like an obstacle course, right? Using pillows and stuff you already have at home for kids to crawl up and through and under and around, right? Obstacle courses such as those will help your children to increase their motor planning, right? And motor planning is just like how and again, I didn't say this already, but I am not an OT. My background is in behavior analysis, but an OT helps create this. But through my years of working with occupational therapists, I know a little, about this area. So motor planning is just when you see, right? You see an obstacle, something in front of you, right? Does your brain send the message to your body, right? And so your body follow through with navigating the environment, right? Some kids need a lot of help with motor planning, right? So how do you do that? You do that by creating scenarios for them to use that skill, right? Safely, you know? So obstacle courses at home using pillows and different safe equipment can be one nice way to work on motor planning. Balance, okay, is another big one. Like I said, that gravitational insecurity on the potty sometimes can really inhibit children from wanting to even sit. So working on balance, here's something simple. It's like painter's tape on the ground. Such a cute little idea. And the kiddos just following along with the painter's tape. Other things, other skills, squatting, trunk rotation. This means like twisting, core strengthening. All of those things can be worked on by playing with them. Okay, going out on the driveway or a sidewalk, and playing with chalk. Okay, so all of these things, all of these skills can be worked on really simply through play at home, and they will support toilet training.
Como que obstruyes todo y después tiene que hacerle como un lavado.
All right, someone, if you're not muted, can you please mute yourself? We are getting a little bit of feedback, and I can't see who is. Here we go. I might have just muted you. Okay.
No.
Some other ways that you can work on skills that support toilet training, fine motor skills, right?
Difícil.
Bilateral coordination. Again, fancy OT words. That means using both hands to do something, right? So stringing pasta. I love this. Sponges. You can buy some. We did this for water play this year. Buy some big, cheap sponges off of Amazon. Get some big bins. Just put some water and soap, right? The kids can squeeze the water and the soap out of the sponges. Really, really great for strengthening, and it's fun. Kids love water play. And precision. So this looks like corn. I don't know how I feel about corn. I mean, I guess you could eat it, but if it's dried corn, might be a choking hazard. I don't know. You can use things like popcorn, things like that, to place on a line, really simple, and then eat it. Do you know what I mean? So additional skills that you can work on that support toilet training through play at home. Now, let's talk about some sensory components, okay? Because there's definitely a sensory component to this. Flushing. Sometimes the sound of the flush is very aversive to kids, okay? So sometimes you might want to let them leave the room before you flush, okay? And then you can always add that back into part of the routine. But if that is super aversive, you might want to consider it. Also, maybe you get to pick if they flush or if you flush, okay? Smells. I know some kids, again, sensory. If you guys were in our sensory workshop a couple weeks ago, you know that sometimes, and not just kids with sensory processing delays, but everybody has some differences in how they interpret sensory information from the environment. So what might be very uncomfortable sounding or smelling or feeling to me might be totally fine for you, right? So just keeping that in mind of like, our kids might be interpreting this environment differently than we are, right? So smells, okay? Does the room smell okay for them? Should that we have some lavender or something that, smells nice? Fear of the sensation. So we're going to talk about like the two different parts of toilet training, because there's definitely like urinating on the potty is one thing, and then bowel movements is something else. Okay. So a lot of the times we see this fear of the sensation with bowel movements, but sometimes it does happen with the urination as well. Here's the thing. I'm gonna kind of focus on this a lot today. Make it fun. It sounds crazy, but toilet training, being in the potty should be fun. If it's not fun, it's not gonna work. Right? So make it fun. Sing songs, encourage your kids, okay? The step stool helps for another way. It can put a kiddo or an adult in a more of a squat position that can make pooping more comfortable. And some kids might not know how to discriminate sensations. Sometimes we want to avoid extremely consuming distractions to let them connect with what's happening, right? Because sometimes we will, and we'll talk about it. Maybe you're going to use an iPad or something on the toilet. We do want them to make the connection, though, with what is happening, okay? Movement seeking. We talked about this. So make sure that kiddos' feet are supported, right? Whether they're on a low potty with their feet on the ground or at the stool, or maybe you're going to have like a glitter jar or a sensory bottle or a fidget, something in their hands, because just sitting for some kids is challenging, let alone sitting in the bathroom, which is like kids see it's not fun, right? So maybe you need to add something with a movement component. Maybe it's a pop it, right? or some other fidget that they like to give them while they're sitting to help them to sit for longer periods of time. All right, I know we didn't get to the nitty-gritty, and we're gonna get there, but does anyone have any questions so far? I'm gonna check the box. Someone says, is an iPad okay? So iPads, we're going to talk about that. One piece of potty training is reinforcement. Okay, kids have to be reinforced, right? Or get something that they like. The definition of reinforcement is something that, when presented following a behavior, will increase the likelihood of that behavior occurring again, right? So yeah, we want to use things that are going to help increase the likelihood of them going to the bathroom. However, we're going to talk about it in a little bit. You want to kind of withhold some of that reinforcement and have it only for pottying. So if you can't restrict iPad for just and withhold it just for potty, then I would pick something else. Okay. And we're going to talk about that because there's two different pieces of potty training. It's one of them is like that, like sensory component, right? So we want to keep them on the toilet, but the other part of it is reinforcing. So where is the kid at and what are we reinforcing? Are we reinforcing them just being in the bathroom? Are we reinforcing them sitting on the toilet? Right? So once we identify, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, where they're at and what we're reinforcing, then we need to bring in the reinforcer. So you probably don't want to have an iPad on just for the entire potty training experience, right? For the whole routine in the bathroom, because that'll be a little distracting, right? So we'll talk more about that in a little bit when we get to reinforcement. Are there any other questions so far? Going to move on in a minute. Here we go. Okay, routines. Okay, before you're going to start with formal toilet training, and we're going to get there about schedules for toilet training, but before you even think about that, you have to start with routine. Okay, so think about it right now. What does your routine look like for changing your child? Are you changing them on a changer still? Are they laying down in a diaper and you're changing them? Are they standing up and you're doing pull-ups and you're just doing stand-up changes? Are they sitting on the potty, right? But not really going. So think about where you're at first, okay? Because what you want to do is start by embedding sitting on the toilet as part of the routine in the morning or at bedtime, or both, whatever is easiest, okay? But I'm going to caution you with this statement, because if you haven't started just changing them in the bathroom, start there, okay? They have to start associating diaper changes, toileting, all of it with the bathroom. So if you're not there yet, if you're still changing them in the bedroom, start there. Bring it to the bathroom, okay? If you're doing that, if you're changing them in the bathroom, are you doing stand-up changes? If you can. Now, for some kids, you might not be able to. That's okay, all right? But if you can you do a stand-up change, okay? And then if you are doing that, okay, can you have them start sitting just for a moment? Just so their little behinds touch the potty and that's it. Start there, okay? And pick, and honestly, for me, when I was potty training both of my kids, and I'm sorry, I normally do a about me and I didn't. I have two of my own kids that I have raised, a third who I am helping with right now, but I've toilet trained two of my children. And both of them, we started with bedtime routines because morning routines are a little insane for us here at home. So I just started before bath, we'll sit on the toilet. even if it's just for a minute, okay? And then they, go on with the rest of their nighttime routine. It's just embedding the sitting, if that's where you're at, as part of the routine, okay? And then you're gonna follow each instance of sitting with flushing if there's not a sensory concern, and then washing and drying their hands, right? You wanna build this potty routine, right? So if you're just gonna practice at bedtime or at the bedtime routine, you're gonna sit them down, and you're gonna go through the whole thing, and then you're going to flush, wash, dry hands. Even if they don't actually void on the potty, you're gonna do that, okay? And a visual schedule is a nice way to teach the steps in the routine. We've talked about these before. So like I said, build on your current routine. If your routine includes diaper changing on a table, build onto that. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. And I see your question in the chat, and I'll come back to that during the question period. Okay. All right, visuals. So we talked about this a little bit. Have visuals at your child's eye level up and available. And we can always help you with this. If you want something specific for your routine, we can create them at school and send them in and send them home for you if you want them. But visuals are really helpful. We've done a lot of staff training on the importance of visual supports. And I look at it this way, think about how many tools that you have, right, to help you get through your day. I mean, how many schedules do you have? I literally have like a big written out planner. I have my Google Calendar. I have my Outlook calendar. I have my calendar on my fridge. I have reminders on my phone. I have sticky notes, right? I have all these things, right? They're all supports that we use just to get through our day. Visuals are like that for kids. They're reminders of what the expectation is. What does this routine look like? And it takes the demand off of the parents sometimes when you have a visual. It's like, well, I'm not telling you, this is just what we're doing, right? And sometimes, kiddos, just when something is presented by a parent, they're more likely to refuse than if it's just an expectation, right? So visuals can help in many ways. Language. So everyone giggles during this when we talk about it, but it is good to use appropriate terms for private parts. So penis and vagina. And yes, they might start saying it over and over again. If your kid has vocal language, they might start saying it. And you have to be like, yes, boys have penises, girls have vaginas. But when we use other terms, it can be confusing. So we want to try to use those appropriate terms. We talked about this already. Phrase directions positively. Tell them what we want them to do. So we'll say, sit on the potty, not stop wiggling. Say, quiet hands or hold your book, not don't touch that. Okay. Focus on what you want them to do rather than what they are doing incorrectly. And avoid negative statements like, oh, that's stinky. Sometimes, we say it to be funny, but we just want to be careful that we're not discouraging them from the toileting process by making those kind of statements, if that makes sense. So what to expect? Every kid is different, okay? Toilet training is going to look different for each kid, and that's totally fine. The start is slow because you start with routine, right? It's not stressful. It's just building something and getting it built up into a routine. Make it fun. I'm going to send you this slideshow, and it has all of the resources with potty songs, videos, books, okay? So talk about it, right? There are a ton of songs you can sing, books you can read, videos you can watch, whether on the potty or off the potty, to talk about and encourage potty training, okay? Some kids might sit for literally 1 second and get back up. That's okay. focus on urination first once you get there, and the bowel movements come afterwards. Accidents happen, literally. They're going to happen. So be prepared, okay? Also, when you get to the point where you've already built it into your routine, you guys have a good flow, and you want to really focus on, all right, we're ripping the Band-Aid off, we're taking off the pull-ups, we're doing this. It is an investment of your family's time and energy. Make sure it fits into your life right now. I mean, it's not selfish. It is just like, can we actually do this at this moment, right? Because if you have like a trip coming up or lots of events on the weekend, right, it's going to be really hard to try and do that. Now, I always like to time this training before spring break because you guys might have a couple days home with your kids, right? And I always suggest that have 3 or 4 days home with them when you can work on this. And can we work on it at school? Sure, we can. But the initial effort and the building it into the routines should start at home, right? And then we can carry over what strategies that you're finding to be successful at home. Okay. All right, start tracking. So, if you know what your child's typical schedule of voiding looks like, okay, that's going to be really helpful. I'm going to send you some data sheets with the resources to this presentation. And it really is just like time, date, or date, time, and then what did they do? Did they urinate or have a bowel movement in their diaper if they're still in diapers? And you're going to track that, okay? And then once they start maybe going so much to the potty, and then you can add a column. Okay, did they sit in the potty? Yes or no? Did they go? Yes or no? Right. So just tracking, especially when you get to the point where you want to work on bowel movements, it's really helpful to know what your child's natural schedule looks like, right? Because then you can tailor your schedule, right? So that it aligns with what their body's natural schedule is. And yes, like everything, there are some apps. Don't spend money. This is one, the perfect potty app. If you want to look it up. I've never used it, but there are apps you can use. I'm a proponent for not spending money if you can avoid it. All right, here we go. Back to motivation and reinforcement. Okay, do you know what your child likes? I'm also going to send you a preference assessment handout. What does that mean? It means identifying things that your child likes, because we need to find something that can be a potty reward. Okay, it might be a toy, a food item, an activity. It might be something new. Kids like things that are new and novel. Maybe it's a prize box, like a bunch of cheap stuff in it, right? But we need some effective reinforcement. And what does that mean, right? Number one, they have to like it. So we can't just use stickers. Wherever on the potty trains, kid doesn't like stickers, they're not going to work, right? It needs to be realistic to use every time. If your kid loves chocolate bars, great. But you don't want to give them a chocolate bar every time they sit on the potty. We have used like mini M&Ms. You can use those, right? Think about what is realistic. And it is best to use it just for pottying, right? How do we increase motivation, right? By withholding something specifically for one thing, right? So if you can't restrict the phone or iPad, then maybe that's not what you're going to use for reinforcement, okay? And maybe it's one app or one song. I don't know how you want to work it, but try to think about something that you can use just for pottying. Okay. Other ideas, candy, except the treasure chest, having a potty party, right? Get creative. Okay. Because it needs to be something that your kids like. Okay. We're going to stop here. And there was a couple questions in the chat. So, all right, so I'm going to go through some of the questions in the chat. One statement kind of was he hides when he poops, especially when we have his tablet. A lot of kids hide when they have bowel movements, okay? That's why I said start tracking that. Tracking track the times that they're hiding, because then once you get to the point where you want to start having them sit in the potty, you're gonna go 5 or 10 minutes before the average time that they start to hide. Okay. My son doesn't like the toilet. If you sit him, he'll start crying. He doesn't like the noise the toilet does when we flush. We talked about that, right? So we have to create a positive association with the toilet in the bathroom. So if he's crying when you're sitting, back up. Okay, don't have him sit. Just bring him into the bathroom, and then give him his reinforcement. Okay, so you're gonna meet the kids where they're at. If he's crying when he sits, okay, back it up and just bring him. Oh, you were in the bathroom. Great job. Here's your M&M. Okay, build the positive association. Once he does that for like 3 days without crying, then try to sit again. Okay, all right. Now you've been doing so good with coming in the bathroom. Now we're gonna try to sit, and you can have your M&M. Okay, see if that works. Also, don't flush. Don't flush. If he doesn't like it, wait till he's out to flush the toilet. Okay. At least when you're starting, because you don't want anything that's gonna be aversive. This one says, my son doesn't show if he has to go, just says I poop. Right. So that's one of those readiness signs. So he's identifying when he goes. Start tracking it. Start tracking when he has his bowel movements, like I said with the other comment, so that when you start the toilet training, you're going to put him on the potty before, okay, those times that you've tracked. So yes, this next comment said he cries when I sing a potty song. If your child does not like songs, don't sing them. Don't sing it, right? Find a book or a potty story, find some stickers, something else. If what you're doing makes them more upset, just stop doing it as it relates to reinforcement for the potty. Okay. We're going to talk about how often in 1 minute. Okay, we're going to get there. The nitty-gritty is the next section. Okay. Does anyone else have questions before we move on to the next section? Let's see. So yeah, so there's not a regular schedule. Okay, just track it. I would track it and see if you can find any patterns throughout the week. Maybe it's not maybe the days are not regular, but check the weekly schedule. Track it for 5 days and then see if you can identify any patterns. Okay, start there. Okay. Alrighty. Let's move on. Here's the nitty-gritty. So toilet training, especially schedules, need to be individualized for you, your family, and your child. Do what is practical, feasible, and comfortable. Sitting should be fun. I'm going to say it over and over and over again. It should be fun. Your kiddo should not be crying during this process. If they're crying, back up and reinforce the step before. The only way a kiddo is going to be successful with potty training is if you can create a scenario that they are compliant within. Okay, so high levels of reinforcement, effective reinforcement, and back it up if they're being upset for sitting. Okay, like I said, and if you keep getting to the point where you're like, okay, we're standing up, changing, I'm reinforcing, and then every time they sit, they're hysterical, and then you keep backing up, then maybe take a little break, right? We don't want everyone to be stressed about it. The more stressed you are and your kid is about it, the less likely it is to be effective, right? So it's always okay if you start and stop and start and stop. That's part of this process. Okay, it's going to look different for every kid. Once you all, sorry, I'm taking some water. Once you are ready to do a schedule, which we're going to talk about, you need to give your child consistent access to beverages. Their bladder should stay full. It's more opportunities for them to void. Okay. Also, once you're doing a schedule, we should be switching to underwear. That's the big step, right? Like once you're actually like doing it, you're doing it, right? You're gonna be at home for 3 or 4 days. Pull-ups are done. It's just underwear and you're gonna roll with it, okay? But that means that you've already done embedded in the routine, identified reinforcement, they've been sitting, right? So now you're gonna work on a timed schedule. Okay. What about kids with tube feeds? Nothing should restrict a child from starting to potty train. Okay. So if your child is on tube feeds, it's totally fine. Okay. You're still going to track their wet soiled diapers. And schedule training might be a really good option. Okay. Because kids with tube feeds are actually probably going to be more regular. Right. So we're going to talk about schedule training and how eventually schedule training turns more like naturalistic, where kids request to go to the bathroom. For some kids, they may never get to the requesting portion. It might just be schedule training, and that is okay as well. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so here's again, these are options, okay? Like I said before, you have to do what works for your family and your child, okay? So here's an option, okay? Take your child to the bathroom every 15 to 20 minutes. Now, if you've been tracking and you know they wet their diaper every 30, you want to go before that. So you want to go about 20. Okay. You normally start about 15 to 20 minutes, and they're not going to sit for more than 5 minutes. We're not going to sit for a long time. Okay. 5 minutes or they urinate. Okay. You can set a timer. Kids love timers. Put a timer on your phone. Okay. They have all the little cute ones now, right? 5 minutes. If the kid doesn't void after 5 minutes, it's fine. Okay. You help them or have them put their clothes back on, you wash hands, and you leave the bathroom. Okay. If they do urinate while they're on the potty, you're going to give them whatever their reinforcer is. Oh, great job. You want to here's your M&M. Okay. And you're gonna do this like while they're on potty. Okay. Like I literally we used like gummy worms for my daughter. So we had like a little, just like a Tupperware of Gabby's potty treats, had them like in a thing above the toilet. And I literally would, when she went, I would pull out the gummy worms and I would give her one while she was still sitting on the toilet before she even wiped. Like it needs to be immediate. Okay. And then you're going to help them again to get to wipe and put their clothes back on, wash hands, and leave the bathroom. Okay. And then you're going to ask or guide the child to check their own pants every 5 to 10 minutes. These are called dry checks. So if they're dry, you just give them praise. Oh, your underwear is dry. What a big boy or girl. Okay. And that's it. Okay. And then every 15 or 20, back on the potty. Okay. So the purpose in this sort of schedule is it is very intensive. This is probably not one we could start at school, right? It would be out of the classroom more than in, right? So that's why I say it's always good to start these at home, because this is not a schedule that is maintained. This is a schedule that you do for a couple of days and then you start increasing it, right? To 30 minutes, to 40 minutes, right? As the child gets more comfortable with the schedule and the routines, right? So what do you do if they have an accident? It's always the question. So, we're going to get to that. We're the training option 2, and then we'll talk about what to do if they have an accident. So training 1 was our schedule training option, about 15 to 20 minutes. Schedule training option 2 was a sit until you go. Now I have to say, I've never seen this done in a school. And I've only done it, and I'll tell you about my experience. I've done it at home with my child for bowel movements, because my son was very resistant to do bowel movements at home. So this schedule is, so you start about every 30 minutes, but you keep them on the potty for about 20 minutes. Now, you can still set a timer, and the rest of the procedure looks the same. If they don't go, put their clothing on, wash hands, go back. If they do go, you don't have to keep them on for the rest of the time, okay? Then they're done. You give them the reinforcement. Yay, good job going potty. Here's your potty treat. Okay, wipe, clothes on, wash hands, go. And then you still do the dry checks. Now, this is hard because this is only going to work if your child is able to sit on the potty for 20 minutes. I have to say, most kids in this age range probably not able to sit in the potty for 20 minutes unless you're giving them like an iPad, right? So again, I did this with my son. My son was very resistant to bowel movements. He was trained for urination and then would like literally would hold. I could like, sounds very graphic TMI, but I could like see the little poopy come out of his tush. So I literally would get his little potty seat, put him in front of a movie. I think he liked that point. He liked like Lion King or something. And he just sat. I'm like, you're going to sit in the potty. We'll watch Lion King. We'll drink some juice until the poopy comes out. So we did that. And that was like the hurdle that's how we got over the hurdle of him being resistant to the bowel movements on the toilet. But it is another option. So what if they have an accident? So there is some research on something called positive practice. And I'm sorry if you can't read the whole thing, if you have a little blob here. So positive practice, what is this? It's a behavioral technique. And again, you don't have to do anything when they have an accident, but this is an example of something you can do. It actually is like a punishment procedure. We don't do any punishment procedures at school, but this is something that you could do at home if you wanted to. So if during a dry check, they're wet or they have a visible accident, okay, you would just tell them where they're supposed to pee. So you can say, oh, we don't pee on the chair, we pee on the potty. And then you take them right to the bathroom, okay? They sit on the potty, okay? and then you stand them up, pull their wet stuff back up. It's pretty gross. And then you walk back to the spot that they urinated, okay? And this says repeat it 5 to 10 times. I have never done this, so I've done it with kids previously. I've never done it more than 5 times with this age group. And the last time you do it, they change out of their wet clothes, and then you can have them help as much as the kiddo at this age can help to clean up their accident. The whole point of this is to make it aversive, okay? We don't want to provide them a lot of attention. If they start to smile or laugh, you just stop, because it shouldn't be fun or funny. It shouldn't like doing this. And this would only be used for like urination accidents, not for bowel movements. If a kiddo has a bowel movement accident, just require that they assist in cleaning as much as possible. And that really goes for any accident. If you're not going to use a positive practice procedure, and the kiddo has an accident, I would suggest just bringing them to the bathroom. You can say at one time, oh, you know what? You don't pee on the chair, we pee in the potty. Bring them to the potty and have them help as much as possible with getting out of their wet clothes and into the dry clothes, and then just start back on your schedule. Okay. Okay. So that is positive practice. So what comes next? Okay. Going out. After you start toilet training for a couple of days, you're going to have to leave your house eventually, right? New bathrooms bring new challenges, especially those automated flushes, man. So here's a tip. Stick a pack of Post-it notes in your purse and just put it right over the sensor so that it doesn't flush. Because sometimes they flush when the kids are still sitting on them. And any kid, that can be really aversive. Transportation, this is a big point. Even when you start potty training, I still put my kids in pull-ups for rides over an hour, right? Or close to an hour. Okay. And if you're doing that, let's say you do like 4 days, 3 days of potty training at home and they come to school, you can still put them in a pull-up for bus and then say, hey, when they get to school, can you just take the pull-up off and then put a pull-up back on when they go home? We can do that too. Transportation is a piece that's kind of like the last piece, because their schedule has to be as long as the transportation rides are, right? And bedtime. Holding it all night or waking up to go is a much more difficult skill. So again, diapers or pull-ups overnights are also okay. All right. Bowel movements. I said a lot. So most kids go urinate in the potty first and then later work on the bowel movements. Okay. Requesting. I hear this a lot. Oh, well, my kid can't request to go, so we can't do potty training. That is not a prerequisite. Your child does not need to have verbal skills to go to toilet train, right? You can schedule train them, okay? And then you can use a visual, right? I'll send you guys a toilet picture that you guys can use. And in the beginning, if you have a child that doesn't have a lot of vocal language, you can just use a picture. Like, oh, it's time to go to the bathroom. And you can just use the picture, show it to them. You could have them. I've had families put them on their fridge, put them one on the door to the bathroom. So even if the kid can't stay, have to go, they can go to the bathroom picture and point to it. And that's their indicator that they have to go. Okay. And even if they're not there yet, you can always model with the picture. Okay. The last part, feeding their rewards, is hard for all kids. Once we got to the point where Gabby, my daughter, didn't get gummy worms on the potty anymore, she wasn't too happy about it. But we faded them, right? So we, instead of a whole gummy worm, we did a half, and then we did a quarter, and then we were all done gummy worms, right? And then we had gummy worms for poop, right? So then you switch the reward to the bowel movement. Okay, so you have to fade those rewards out just like you fade the schedules. All right, questions. I'm gonna pull up the chat as well. The last couple slides are resource slides. So there's a bunch of songs, adaptive clothing, apps, timers, books, the potty seats. I don't know why some of these links are so long. I'm gonna stop sharing. And I'm going to stop recording.